If you would please state your full name.
Barbara Ann Woodward.
Thank you. You may inquire.
Thank you. Mrs. Woodward, would you tell the jury what your relationship is to William Theodore Woodward?
He's my husband.
And did you all get married?
We got married in 1999.
Okay. And did you live 1960 Smith Drive?
Yes, we did.
When did you move in then?
We moved in that house, I believe it was 1998.
Okay. While you were living there, did you come to know a group of people, the Hembrees, Piciors, the Blakes, some significant others and children?
Yes, I did.
Could you briefly tell the jury what initially your relationship was with this group of people before the events of August the 5th?
Our initial relationship.
How you met them, what your relationship was leading up to August 5th?
We were very friendly. We were friendly neighbors. They were friendly neighbors. Our children often played together. I don't know how much to say.
Okay, well, were there situations where you all assisted one or more of these people?
Oh, yes, yes, our children played together a lot, and their children, the other families, all of their children would often come to our house to play. There were many times that we fed them, or they would sometimes stay at our house overnight. We even bought clothes for them on several occasions. There were times that we paid their rent when they were having a hard time.
Specifically, whose rent did you pay?
Well, we paid the Blake's rent one time. My husband also offered to sign on a mortgage for Mr. Hembree because he was having a really hard time, and we felt really bad for him and didn't want him to lose his house, and so my husband offered to sign a mortgage for him to help him keep the house.
Okay. Now, even before August 5th, did there arise some concerns specifically with Mr. Hembree and that caused you to restrict your daughter going into the Hembree home?
Oh, yes, there was a few times.
Did there come a point in time where something happened that changed your all's relationship with the Hembrees, Piciors, Blakes at all?
Yes.
What actually occurred? What was the beginning of the change of that relationship?
Well, it really began before that, when we tried to assist the police with their investigation of drugs in the household.
You were telling us that, by your perception, that things began to turn even beforehand. Now, I don't want you to get into what other people told you or things of that nature, but when was it that you believed that the relationship started to turn?
I believe it started to change in the month or so before all of the harassment began.
Okay. And was that something that changed your feelings toward the Hembrees, Piciors, and Blakes, or their feelings toward your family?
I believe both. I believe.
Okay. And again, what do you believe caused the Hembrees, Piciors, and Blakes to change their relationship towards you, not the other way around?
I'm not sure how to answer.
Was there something that they felt your family had done that they objected to?
Sustained.
There's something that they expressed to you all that you had done that they were upset about?
It was their behavior.
What was their behavior? Let's just describe their behavior.
They were not friendly anymore.
Okay. Now, did some event happen on Friday, August 3rd that was significant in the change of the relationship?
I can't remember what happened on August 3rd.
Okay. You recall anything involving Ava's gift?
Yes.
Okay. So you don't recall
yes.
exactly when that happened, but there was something involving a gift with Ava.
Yes, there was.
Okay. Tell the jury, first of all, about Ava's gift.
Okay. My daughter was celebrating her 12th birthday, and her birthdays were always a really big deal in our house. And a work friend of mine had dropped off a gift. They left it on the doorstep, and the next day called me to ask me if we had gotten it okay, and I told her no, we had not received the gift.
Now, did there come a point in time where you suspected that someone in the Hembree household might know something about that?
I knew right away that it had to be someone in that household.
Why is that?
One of the children was frequently stealing things from our property and others' property around the neighborhood. The day before that, I had seen three of the children trying to break in the house across the street. There were many times I had gone to Mr. Hembree and asked about packages that had been left on my door where the delivery tracking had said it had been delivered at such and such time and it would not be there. And then of course, they said that they didn't have it, and then you would see one of the children with the items. So I knew that that's where the items were going.
Okay. And did your husband do anything on August 5th to bring that to the Hembree's attention?
He did. He went over and asked if they had seen a package on our door.
Now, was he accompanied by anybody when he made that?
He went over twice. The first time he just went and politely asked. The second time he did ask an officer to accompany him just to have it on record.
Okay. Now, after he had the conversation where the officer was present, did anything else happen that day?
Yes.
What did you observe happen?
I observed Mr. Hembree taking pictures of our house and our yard, of our family outside.
Okay. Did this concern you?
It did. It really concerned me.
Why?
We had chickens as pets, and I was afraid that they would call code enforcement and report the chickens just to be mean.
How long did you have the chickens?
Birds are great pets, and And my husband had always wanted chickens. So he bought a few chickens. When they were...
Sustained.
How long had you had them?
How long? A few years.
Okay. Had there ever been an issue with anybody in the neighborhood about the chickens prior to this day?
Oh, no, everyone loved the chickens.
Okay. And that would include the Hembrees?
Oh, yes. The children would come over and help us feed the chickens. They would help catch bugs for the chickens. We would give them a quarter, for catching a cricket or whatever. And they'd love to come over and help feed them. And they were like pets. You could pick them up and hold them and pet them, and it was really fun. So they enjoyed that.
Okay. But on August 5th, you observed Mr. Hembree taking photographs of the backyard where the chickens were.
Yes.
Okay. And what happened then?
Code enforcement came to our house and told us we had to get rid of them.
Okay. Now, was there some sort of confrontation with your husband and Mr. Hembree and this group from across the street on that day?
I can't remember the actual order of events of what happened on each day. There was an argument either that day or the next day, yes.
Okay. Well, the exact day is not important. It was somewhere around this point in time. So tell the jury what you recall about that altercation.
My husband confronted him about why he was taking pictures of us in our house.
Okay. As that confrontation went on, was there also a rehashing of this concern about the stealing of Ava's present?
Yes.
Okay, so it evolved from the chickens back into the, I'd like my daughter's present back.
Yes.
And at that point in time, did it start with just your husband and Mr. Hembree, or was everybody involved all at first?
The other neighbors got involved pretty quickly.
Okay. And what was the nature of their involvement?
They immediately started harassing and threatening and...
Well, tell the jury what you mean by harassing. What was the type of things that were being directed toward y'all?
It started out as just yelling at us from across the street, yelling insults and driving up and down the street, honking the horns, making as much noise as they possibly could. It escalated into yelling at us every time we walked outside, when you tried to walk the dog, when you're taking your child to the bus stop. It just never stopped. It was constant. Whether we were inside or outside, it was constant, and you could hear everything. And when you went outside, it was even worse than when you were inside.
Who was doing this?
Oh, I observed every person of both of those households participating in this, even the children.
Okay, when you say every person, let's talk about the household. Who was in the households that you're talking about?
That would be Mr. Hembree, Mr. Picior, Mr. Hembree's children.
How many children?
He had Zachary and Corey and Destiny, and then you had Kim Cass and her two girls. Mr. Picior's son was there almost daily, so he was participating in this.
Would that be Justin?
Yes. And then you have Mr. and Mrs. Blake and their 2 girls.
Now, when you said even the children were participating, what types of things did you observe in terms of the children participation?
They would often sit, there's a big rock in the corner of the yard, and they would often sit there and just yell at my kids whenever they would come outside. If my daughter was walking home from the bus stop, they were yelling just obscenities at her, threatening words.
Where were their parents when this was happening?
Well, they were out in the yard or in the carport, which was right there.
I'm sorry.
They could see and hear it as well as I could.
Did you ever specifically have any conversation with them asking them to control their children and not have them taunt your daughter?
Oh, yes.
What was their reaction?
They would, Gary and Kim would yell at the girls, "You leave her alone." And that didn't stop anything.
Okay. Did you have any specific conversation with Kim regarding her children's activities against Ava on the bus?
Oh, yes. Several times.
What type of things were you concerned about?
They would go out of their way to sit next to Ava on the bus and just verbally torment her. And when you're a kid, it's a big deal. They'd call her names, they'd try to trip her, they would push her, they would pull her hair. It was every day, constant.
Do you recall a statement on or about August 12th from IM? You specifically spoke with Kim Cass about her daughter's harassment and what she responded in terms of that and her intentions regarding her daughter's harassment of your daughter.
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
Do you recall a conversation with Ms. Cass on or about August 12th regarding her children taunting and harassing your daughter Ava and her response as to what she intended with her daughter's activities towards your daughter?
Yes, I do remember that conversation.
What was that statement?
She immediately started yelling at her girls, telling them to leave Ava alone.
Do you recall any conversation where she had indicated?
Sustained.
Do you recall a statement that you can put in your injunction paperwork regarding her comments at or around this time?
I'm sorry, I don't.
I'll come back to it in a moment, and once I get that to refresh your recollection. Susan. You had described to the jury what you were talking about in terms of harassment. You also mentioned the terminology threats. What did you mean by threats during this period of time?
With me or with my daughter?
Anything directed toward you, your husband, or your family?
The children would talk about how they would kick Ava's ass. They threatened her with that. with my family, I'm sorry, it's so hard to talk about this.
You need a recess? Mrs. Woodward, before we took our break, I was asking you about different things that were directed toward your daughter, Ava. May I approach?
You may.
See if this refreshes your recollection about any activity.
I do remember that. I do.
Give me a moment. Let me ask the question. That refreshes your recollection?
Yes.
You indicated that you remembered a time when Kim Cass actually intervened and told her children to knock it off. Did there come a point in time when Kim's attitude toward that changed?
Yes.
What was the nature and what was expressed to you?
I remember exactly now. She stood in that driveway and told me she would sick her kids on my daughter. She would tell them to harass my daughter until she could not function anymore.
It may seem like a silly question, but how did that make you feel?
Oh, it made me feel terrible.
Now, right up until the events of September 2nd into the early morning hours of September 3rd, specifically, did the harassment of your daughter continue?
Yes.
Was it intermittent or frequent, or how would you describe it?
I would call it frequent.
Now, in addition, I'm going to move from things that were directed toward your children and talk about things that were directed toward you and or your husband. Was there, and again, I'm trying to upset you, but the question that I'd ask specifically, you had used the term threats. What did you mean by threats that were directed toward you?
Carrie said that she would rape my daughter up the ass. And she said that she would have all the neighbors participate. And that she would burn down my house.
Do you recall whether or not anybody else in this group made any similar type comments or threats directed toward you?
Yes, Roger said. I can still hear their voices screaming at me in the street. And he said, yeah, that's what we're going to do. She said she would pay people if she had to. And Billy kept saying, leave my daughter alone. And then she just said it again.
And when these comments were first made, Were your son and daughter within earshot of them?
I would say yes.
Did you actually move them into the house while this was still going on?
I did move them into the house, but it didn't matter. You could hear everything.
Now, these threats directed against your child, your family as a whole, did you take those threats serious?
Oh, yes. Yes, I did.
Did you have any doubt in your mind that they were credible threats, things that they were capable of doing and might in fact do?
Overruled. You can answer.
I took it very seriously. I had no doubt that they were capable of doing it.
Now, were there other threatening behaviors between this particular incident on the 11th right up until September 2nd?
Yes.
What types of things did you personally observe?
I observed, well, I heard comments like, "We have a gun now," and they would make a finger gesture of a gun and point it at us. "We have a gun now. We can do whatever we want."
I want to show you a blow-up of Defendant's Exhibit 7. You recognize the person in this?
Yes,
Have you seen that photograph before?
I have.
Who is that?
Roger Picior.
Where did you see that photograph?
He posted it on Facebook.
Now, seeing that photograph on there, did that cause you any concerns?
Oh, yes.
Why?
Well, it's obvious he has access to some type of rifle easily enough that he could take a picture and post it.
Okay. And is this photograph, this Facebook photo, at or around the time that you're hearing these threats from this group?
Yes.
We have a gun, the shooting, and all of that?
Yes.
How did that affect your belief about whether or not these threats were credible?
How can I not take that seriously? It terrified me.
Did you draw this photograph to the attention of your husband?
I can't remember if I did or not, but I do know that he saw it.
Okay. Now, were there other types of threats or activities that were directed? At this point in time, I'm going to kind of focus on the August 5th right up into the time of the injunction hearing.
Okay.
Tell the jury about the types of things that was happening by this gang against you all during that period of time.
Well, there was constant noise, constant yelling at us, yelling obscenities, yelling the threats. They even threatened to shoot my dog. My husband would, one time my husband was walking our dog, and they had dogs that were big dogs and not on leashes, and the dogs would come charging out at him. He thought he was about to get attacked by these dogs. I saw this happen. It scared me to death.
What was your feelings during this period of time about whether or not you and your family were safe in your own home?
Up until the injunction hearing, I thought that if we just minded our own business, I really thought that it would just go away. Well, I hoped. I always thought that if you ignore bullying, it goes away, and that's what I thought it was. I thought it would they would get bored, and it would go away.
Okay. Now, you did seek injunctive relief, you and your husband, on
Yes.
behalf of your family against them.
Yes,
And were you present during the injunction hearing?
I was, yes.
Okay. Now, we've already heard testimony about the fact that Judge Moxley denied the injunction.
Okay.
How did that make you feel about your family's security, the fact that the court would not act?
I felt helpless. I really felt like the court would help us in some way. And being told we cannot help you made me feel like I had to do something else to try and help the family.
Now, up until that time, you had repeatedly called the Titusville Police Department to intervene. Is that correct?
Yes.
Had they ever done anything to actually prevent this abuse being directed against you and your family?
Not that I saw, not that I know of.
How did that make you feel about the police department's ability to protect you and your family?
Well, I lost confidence. Every time they came out, they said we can't do anything. So I worried that they would not do anything to protect us.
Now, you all did install a security camera on your property shortly after the incident on the 5th. Is that correct?
That's right.
And why did you do that?
Well, so if anything happened, we would be able to protect ourselves and know that what was going on outside, we could see what was happening.
After the security camera was installed and you called the police, did you ever offer to give any of that information to them?
Oh, yes, we did.
Were they receptive to that?
No, there was one officer who came inside and looked at what direction the camera was facing, but that was all.
Okay. Did they ever ask for or take, right up until I understand things changed after the shooting. We'll talk about that in a minute. But up until the time, the actual date of the shooting, did anybody from Titusville Police Department ever request any of your video footage?
I cannot think of anyone that requested any of the footage, no.
Okay. Do you specifically remember offering the footage to them?
Yes? Yes, I do.
Okay. Now, after the injunction hearing, you all attended several of your neighbors who had witnessed various things, police officers, the Hembrees, Piciors, Blakes, they all were there. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, directly after the denial of the injunction, do you recall any instructions to the group about leaving?
About leaving?
Yeah.
Well, the judge told us all to go home and play nice.
Okay. How about in terms of your actually leaving the courthouse that day? Was there any efforts taken to keep you all separate that you recall?
No.
Okay.
No.
Now, did you actually observe the incident between Mr. Hembree and your husband directly after the injunction?
Yes, I did.
Tell the jury what you observed.
Well, immediately after the hearing, when we tried to leave, all of those people were standing in the hallway, preventing us from leaving. We actually had to get a deputy from the court to go into the hallway and asked them to leave so that we could leave. We were afraid to walk past them. It was small, so they were right here. The deputy asked them to leave, that it was time for them to leave. And so we waited just a moment for them to go outside, get in their cars, type of thing. They didn't do that. Some of them left, and Mr. Hembree and his girlfriend stayed behind until we got outside.
What happened when you exited the courthouse?
He was parked right across the street. Mr. Hembree was parked right across the street, leaning against his car, and he was just smiling, and he just seemed so proud of himself. He made a comment to my husband.
Do you recall what that comment was?
Actually, I don't remember what the comment was.
Do you recall either he or his girlfriend doing anything with the camera?
I don't remember
Okay.
that.
But what happened after he directed the comment towards your husband?
My husband went across the street and punched him.
Okay. Fight ensued?
Yes.
At some point, and somebody got involved with pepper sprays.
Yes. Someone who was standing outside the courthouse came over and pepper sprayed all of us. It's not something I recommend.
Okay. Did you get pulled into this altercation, and was anything directed toward you personally?
I don't remember that exactly. I ran after him, and I remember I was screaming, but I don't remember what I was saying. But I was trying to pull him off of Gary, and I got knocked down, and then I was just laying on the ground.
Do you happen to recall who knocked you down?
I don't remember who knocked me down. I just remember falling and thinking, I can't believe this is happening to me. And then someone helped me up, asked me if I was okay. I don't remember who knocked me down.
Okay. Now, after that, your husband was actually given some paperwork regarding notice to appear for his activity. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then, did you return to your home?
I did. I went, after we were treated by the paramedics, I went straight home.
Okay. And your husband went, we've heard, with his dad initially.
Yes.
Okay. Did you arrive home before they did or after they did?
I arrived home before they did.
And what were you greeted with when you arrived home?
Coming down the street, I could see people standing out in their yard. They were already out in the yard waiting for us to come home.
Who were the people?
I'm sorry. I distinctly remember Carrie going out into the street looking to see who the car is that's coming down the road. She would look, and then she'd go back up into the yard. And as I got closer, she came out again and looked in the street. And I pulled up into the driveway and got out of the car, and she realized that I was by myself, so she went and sat back down in the swing in the yard.
Okay, were there, you're speaking about Carrie Blake.
Yes, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Were there other people in the yard with Ms. Blake?
Yes, Jessica Nobles was out there. I believe a couple of the kids were out there, but I can't remember which ones now.
Okay.
They were laughing and carrying on.
Okay. So they appeared to be amused by the situation.
Oh,
Sustained.
Well, would you describe their behavior? Did they appear appear angry? Did they appear amused? Did they appear, what?
The beginning of the question, state that again, Mr. Eisenmenger.
Said, how did they appear?
Okay, you may respond.
It appeared as though they were amused. They were laughing. They weren't acting like they had just been in a courtroom.
Okay. Were you present when your husband arrived with his father?
Yes.
What was, if any, activity directed toward him once he got home?
As soon as, I was waiting for him to come home. As soon as the car pulled up in the driveway, several people gathered in the yard along with Carrie and Jessica. I don't remember everyone who was there. They immediately started.
Let me stop you for a moment. Do you remember any of them?
Do I remember any of
Any of them besides Carrie?
I remember Carrie being there, and I remember Jessica being there.
Any of the males?
I don't think Gary was home yet, but I really believe Roger was there. But not Gary and not Kim, not yet.
Tell me what you observed in terms of their activities once your husband arrived.
They immediately started yelling at him, laughing and yelling, "We can do anything to you now." I know something was said, but that he responded to, but I can't remember what it was.
Verbally responded or physically responded?
Yeah, I believe he verbally responded. I can't remember exactly.
Okay. All right. Now, did that continue for a period of time, or how long did?
Oh, it went on for hours and hours.
All that evening?
Oh, yes, all that evening for sure.
Now, there also were some neighbors of your all's who came to testify on your all's behalf. Is that correct?
Yes.
I think the Casts and the Maldons were the two couples. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, who did you say?
I'm sorry, I said Cast, I meant. Thank you. I apologize for my own stupidity. Should carry the notes. Your neighbors, the Crows and the Maldons.
Yes.
Testified. Were there to testify, didn't actually get to testify. Is that correct? The injunction hearing.
Yes, they did go to the injunction hearing.
Okay. Now, after they were there and appeared on your behalf, did you observe anything directed toward them by this gang of people?
I did observe that, yes.
What types of things did you observe that were directed toward them now that they had been brought into this conflict?
I personally observed several of them yelling obscenities to my neighbors.
Which neighbors, if you recall?
It was Marty and Larry Maudlin.
All right. Anything else that you personally observed?
No, I can't remember anything.
Okay.
It was more than one time, but I don't remember exactly what.
Okay. Now, after the injunction, did things involving this group get any better, or
No.
any worse?
It got much worse.
In what way?
Well, that's the time period when they threatened to rape my daughter, my 12-year-old daughter, and burn down my house. That's when they said, "We have a gun now. we can do anything to you.
Now, before you had indicated that up till the time of the injunction, you were just hoping that this was merely bullying activity and it would go away.
Yes.
After the injunction, did your attitude toward all this change?
Oh, yes.
In what way?
I realized, or I felt like it would not stop. I felt like we had to get away from it completely. Up until then, I thought that we would live in that house forever. I thought that was our house forever, and I realized that that wasn't going to happen. We were never going to be safe there.
Okay. Now, again, we've had some testimony, but you, at some point in time around then, you took some action to find another place. Is that correct?
And that's correct, yes.
What was the plan?
The plan?
Yes?
We went to a local realtor and said, we're in a situation, we need to find a new house right now. And he worked with us, told us, we told him what we could afford, and he found us a wonderful, wonderful house. And we were so happy to put a bid on it, and they accepted it. And we were just really encouraged that we would be able to move soon and get out.
Okay. Now, based on comments that were direct to you, did you realize that a gang across the street kind of knew that they had driven you from the neighborhood?
Sustained.
Well, did the comments in terms of threats against you all, etc., did they cease after you had found a place?
No. No, they did not.
How frequent was this activity against you and your family?
In the beginning, it was every other day. After the injunction hearing, it was a daily occurrence, I'd say.
Okay. Did you take their threats seriously?
Oh, yes. Yes, very much so.
Did you believe that they meant their threats?
I did. To the point where I started picking my daughter up from the bus stop. At first, we started walking her home, but you couldn't walk. You had to walk past their yard, and you couldn't do that without getting harassed verbally. So I started driving to the next house to pick her up from the bus stop and bring her home. I didn't want her. They had threatened to rape her, so I didn't want her walking past that house by herself, especially with all of the men and the boys there. So I picked her up in the car.
Okay. How about with your son? Did you take any special precautions with your 4-year-old? He was 4 at that time, right?
He was 4.
And I'm sorry, I didn't actually ask you how old your daughter Ava was at that time.
She was 12.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, my son was 4, and he liked to play outside, and like most little boys, and I was afraid to let him go outside, so I just kept him in the house all the time. He liked to help me walk the dog, but I was afraid because if I had to run, I wouldn't be able to carry him and run. I started taking the dog out the back way, and the neighbor let me walk the dog in her yard so I wouldn't have to go out front and be seen.
Did you see any changes in the behavior of your children as a result of this stream of threats and harassment?
Oh, yes. Yes, I did.
Could you describe that to the jury, please?
They became very clingy, more so than kids normally are. Whatever room I was in, they would follow me. My son started stuttering. He had never stuttered before. He was very anxious. He was crying every day. It was unusual behavior for him. My daughter was just very nervous all of the time, afraid to be alone, wanted to be with me all the time.
Was your husband aware of these behaviors change in your children.
I have no doubt. Yes.
Now, I want to move you ahead to the evening of September 2nd, 2012. Could you tell the jury what you were doing earlier in the evening?
We had spent the day together with some family who had traveled from out of town. So it was an important day for us just because they didn't travel often. And we spent the day together swimming and just spending time together as a family. We had had dinner at my parents' house, and they had surprised us with an anniversary cake because we were just about to celebrate our anniversary.
Now, when you returned, well, first of all, let me ask a couple of questions. Do you happen to recall how your husband was dressed?
Yeah.
How was he dressed?
He was wearing the same thing he wore all the time, which was a T-shirt and camouflage pants or shorts, I believe.
Okay. Was it unusual for him to wear camouflage clothing?
No, he wore those very, very frequently.
Okay, the camouflage pants, did he have a matching jacket that he wore?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So that was kind of a set?
Yes.
Okay. And again, was it unusual for him to wear that?
No.
Okay. So even during this get-together with your family and anniversary surprise, that was how he addressed that evening?
Yes, we didn't know that they were surprising us with a little party.
Okay. Now, did you all drive home together or separately, if you recall?
I believe we went home together.
Okay. All right. Do you recall being greeted by any sort of reaction when you returned by the gang across the street?
I don't remember specifically.
Well, let me ask you this. We've had some testimony that Mr. Blake, in particular, came over and serenaded you all with his version of a Charlie Daniels song.
Sustained rephrase.
Did you hear his song?
I don't remember that. No.
Okay. What do you remember about what occurred when you all got home?
Well, I remember thinking, okay, we're home again, and this is still this. And I was kind of sad to go home because I didn't want to have another night of worrying. The activity across the street was really loud and just very busy, and I was concerned.
What were you concerned about?
Well, I knew that they were heavy drinkers and they were into drugs, and I was afraid that there was more people than usual, and I was afraid that if they were all participating in something like that, that, sometimes those things get out of hand, and I was just afraid of what they might do.
Specifically, did you have any concerns for your own safety, the safety of your children, the safety of your husband?
I did. I was concerned. We had talked about not staying there that night even. We had been actively looking for a rental, and it just made me feel more strongly about getting out of there. Every single day, I felt more strongly about getting out of that house. I had asked my husband if he would feel safer staying at his parents' house that night. They were making so much noise, you could hear it inside the house. You could hear actual comments inside my house. You couldn't even get away from it inside the house anymore. we kept the blinds closed all the time, and so they put up a floodlight to try and shine through my windows, and we were already to the point of living in a cave, and now I'm in the cave and I still can't get away from it.
Now, during this period of time, were you having any problems sleeping?
Yeah, yes. Well, I always had some problem, and that just made it so much worse.
Troubled by any dreams, any things of that nature?
I can't remember if I had any nightmares during that time. I did after, but I can't remember having any before. I took some medication, so once I got to sleep, I was out.
Okay, well, why did you have medication to sleep?
I was very anxious and was taking an antidepressant to help with anxiety, and one of its side effects is tiredness, I guess, or sleepiness. So I would take it at night to help me sleep.
Okay, and did you feel the need to take medication that night to help you sleep?
Oh, yes.
Okay, do you recall about what time you took medication that night?
I don't remember what time I took it. I would usually take it about an hour before my usual bedtime, but I stayed up later. I'm sorry, I don't remember what time.
That's okay. You recall, you had already talked about, but how long had you heard these comments even through the walls of your house before you took the medication and went to bed?
That would have been all night. You could hear them all night inside the house.
Well, I understand, but I mean, do you recall about how much you were subjected to before you took medication, you were able to sleep? In terms of hours, et cetera, give us some time frame.
It was a couple hours at least.
Okay. Now, during the time that you were awake, before you took the medication, was your husband in the house with you?
Yes.
Had he? You were aware of the fact that after the injunction had been denied, that your husband had firearms returned to him. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And where were they normally kept? How were they kept?
They were normally kept in a closet in one of the bedrooms, and separate from the ammunition.
Okay. All right. That evening, up until the time that you had taken your medication, even in the face of this barrage of threats and comments and things toward you and your family, had your husband armed himself?
No.
Were you able to observe his demeanor?
Yes.
What was his demeanor like during the time when you were awake?
He was nervous, but he seemed calm. And I think he seemed calm to me, but I could tell he was nervous. And I could tell he was trying to keep me at ease. He knew I was nervous.
Okay. How about your children? What was their demeanor?
Well, my son went to bed kind of early. He was tired from all the swimming. My daughter had a hard time going to bed. She was nervous. She had a hard time. She didn't want to be in her room by herself, but I finally got her to go lay down. She was nervous. She didn't want to be in there by herself.
Was she ever in a position where she could hear any of these comments while you were around her?
Yes.
I mean, were they loud enough that everybody in your house couldn't help but hear them?
Yes.
Now, again, it may sound like an obvious question, but how did all of these threats and abuse on that evening make you feel?
I was really scared.
Despite your fear, You still wanted to try and get some sleep?
Yes. We had a big day the next day, so signing mortgage papers. So yeah, I wanted to try and rest.
All right. Now, you, after taking medication, with the help of the medication, you were able to sleep. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, what was the next thing that you recall from that evening?
I recall my phone ringing. It was right next to my bed.
Okay. What happened after that awakened you?
When I picked up the phone, I realized that my neighbor had been trying for several minutes to call me. It had several missed calls on the phone. I realized that there were flashing lights outside, like emergency lights, and I called my neighbor back.
Okay. Now, and clearly at that point something had happened while you were asleep and were unaware of it. Is that correct?
Right. Yes.
So, did you, and we know from other testimony, you had spoke with police officers, et cetera. You, were you actually the person that turned over the surveillance films to the Titusville Police Department, or was somebody else in your family that did that?
No, it was me. I turned over the video from that night to the police department.
Now, you all kept copies, is that correct?
Oh, yes.
I mean, later you actually provided my office with copies.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Don't want you to get into what people told you, et cetera. Anything else of significance that you recall actually observing that evening?
That evening?
Right. Or now we're in the early morning hours of the next day.
I remember walking outside to see what was going on, and Kim was running up and down the sidewalk. She was screaming. There were people walking around everywhere. There were people all over the yard. There was an officer standing at the end of my driveway. And when I tried to approach her to speak to her, she kind of put her hand up like, stay there. But I saw Billy's, something from his clothing on the ground. I thought he had been hurt. Another officer came up to me and said that...
We don't want to get into things other people said.
Oh, okay.
Just what you observed.
A lot of people and activity.
Nothing further with this witness at this time.